claim is based on NATO's model, and these nations are Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. They have clubbed their militaries and called them the United Force of the Alliance of Sahel States. It was formally launched on Saturday at an airbase in Bamako, the capital of Mali.
Taking its next steps towards regional autonomy, with the military leaders of Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso holding high-level talks in Bamako. The second edition of the AES summit aims to strengthen cooperation within the alliance and reduce reliance on ECOWAS. It focuses on defense and security, development, communication and counter-terrorism efforts across the three states. Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso formed an alliance in 2023 and withdrew from ECOWAS last year. These moves follow.
The room was silent in a way that felt unnatural. Not the calm silence of peace, but the heavy stillness that comes right before history tilts on its axis. Beneath the hum of a single overhead light, three flags stood side by side, their colors muted in the dim glow. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. No cameras, no aides, no press leaks. Just a table, a map of Africa stretched across it, and leaders who understood that once the next words were spoken, there would be no turning back. Outside, the world slept. Inside, Africa was waking up. This story does not begin with an announcement. It begins with a realization that crept quietly through Sahelian capitals over years of broken promises, foreign lectures, shifting goalposts, and invisible chains disguised as partnerships. A realization that sovereignty was not something granted. It was something taken back. The first voice to break the silence was calm, almost unsettlingly so. It spoke of history not as something written in textbooks, but as something alive, breathing, waiting for courage, waiting for unity, waiting for a moment bold enough to shatter the old geometry of power. Maps were turned, borders traced with fingers, routes marked, resources circled, names left unspoken but understood. The move they were planning was not just political. It was psychological, economic, symbolic, a message wrapped in action. They were not asking for permission. They were preparing a rupture. Far away, in glass towers overlooking European capitals, analysts were still recycling yesterday's talking points. In Washington, briefing papers sat neatly stacked, confident in assumptions that had gone unchallenged for decades. Africa, they believed, would protest. Africa would negotiate. Africa would eventually comply. They did not see the storm forming in the Sahel. The announcement came without warning. No leaks. No soft launch. No diplomatic cushioning. Three heads of state. One statement. One timing. Within minutes, the words spread across screens like wildfire. A coordinated decision, jointly executed, deliberately irreversible. A move that redrew relationships, bypassed old gatekeepers, and announced, without apology, that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were stepping into a new alignment forged on their own terms. Markets trembled first. Algorithms don't understand defiance, only disruption. Commodity prices flickered. Risk assessments recalculated. Somewhere, a trader whispered, "This wasn't supposed to happen." In European foreign ministries, emergency lights flicked on. Phones rang. Advisors rushed in half-dressed, eyes still foggy with sleep, scanning headlines that made no sense within the old frameworks. The language was unfamiliar. The confidence unsettling. This was not a plea. This was a declaration. Washington reacted with disbelief, then urgency. Situation rooms filled. Analysts spoke faster than they thought. Acronyms flew across the table. Someone asked whether this could be reversed. No one answered. ECOWAS convened in haste, its corridors buzzing with tension. Statements were drafted, revised, softened, hardened, then softened again. How do you respond when the rules you once enforced are openly rejected? How do you mediate when the ground beneath mediation has shifted? At the United Nations, diplomats scrambled to interpret a move that did not fit neatly into existing resolutions. Was it legal? Was it dangerous? Was it contagious? The last question lingered longest, unspoken but heavy. If three could do this, who would be next? Foreign media raced to frame the narrative. Some called it reckless. Others called it irresponsible. A few, quietly, called it inevitable. Panels filled with experts who had never walked the streets now erupting thousands of kilometers away. Because on those streets, something else was happening. In Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, crowds gathered before official explanations were even aired. Radios blared. Phones buzzed. Social media lit up with a single word repeated in dozens of languages. Finally, old men nodded slowly, remembering other moments when hope had risen only to be crushed. Young people danced anyway. Women ululated. Arguments broke out in cafes. Celebration collided with fear. Pride wrestled with uncertainty. But beneath it all ran a current too strong to miss. This felt different. Graffiti appeared overnight. Chains snapping. Maps reimagined. Slogans painted with shaking hands and steady conviction. Not everyone agreed. Not everyone felt safe. But everyone felt something shift. Back in the shadows, pressure began to build. Diplomatic cables multiplied. Warnings were issued in polished language that barely concealed irritation. Aid packages were quietly reconsidered. Sanctions were discussed in rooms where Africa was still spoken of as a problem to be managed rather than a partner to be heard. Intelligence agencies went to work, searching for fractures. Who could be pressured? Who could be persuaded? Who could be isolated? Leaks surfaced, then vanished. Stories planted, then debunked. Power hates surprises, and it hates unity even more. Inside the three countries, debates raged. This move was not magic. It would not erase poverty overnight or silence guns by decree. The leaders knew this. That was the point. This was not a performance. It was a gamble rooted in the belief that dignity was worth risk. In a closed briefing, one of them spoke words that would never be quoted but would echo nonetheless. "We have tried obedience. It did not save us. Now we will try courage." The slow reveal of what this historic move truly meant unfolded in layers. New trade routes envisioned. Security arrangements redefined. External actors repositioned from masters to observers. A recalibration of who sets terms and who responds to them. This was not isolation. It was reorientation. Africa, long treated as a chessboard, was moving its own pieces. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Three nations long portrayed as fragile were acting with a clarity that confounded those who underestimated them. The chains being broken were not only economic or military. They were mental, the most durable kind. Still, the threats did not disappear. They intensified. Sanctions loomed like storm clouds. Currency pressures mounted. Foreign commentators predicted collapse with thinly veiled anticipation. They had seen this movie before, they said. They knew how it ended. What they did not account for was memory. Memory of borders drawn without consent, of resources extracted with smiles and contracts written elsewhere, of security partnerships that brought more insecurity, of development plans that developed everyone except the people they were named after. This move was not born in a single meeting. It was the culmination of accumulated refusals. As days passed, other African capitals watched closely. Official statements were cautious. But in private, questions were asked. Could this model hold? Could solidarity outpace retaliation? Could the center of gravity truly shift? The world was stunned not because the move was irrational, but because it was coherent, because it was unified, because it was unapologetic. In newsrooms, producers argued over headlines. In universities, professors revised lecture notes mid-semester. In think tanks, funding proposals were quietly adjusted to reflect a new reality no one had planned for. And in that original room, now empty, the overhead light still hummed. The flag still stood. The map remained marked, lines drawn with intention. History, once patient, had stepped forward. The final hours of the first week brought no resolution. Only tension, only waiting, only the unmistakable sense that something irreversible had begun. Africa had not whispered this time. It had spoken, and as the world strained to respond, one question hung in the air, heavier than any sanction or statement ever could. If this is only the beginning, what happens when the rest of the continent decides it has nothing left to ask for and everything left to claim?